Laura Nader, speaking about the history of public education, the cutbacks, the priorities, you're an anthropologist, a social, cultural anthropologist. Give us a little history on this struggle. Well, go back as far as you want.
Now, this debate has been with us as far as the beginning of the country, when Thomas Jefferson and some of the founders pointed out that you can't have a democracy without public education. So some people disagree, and they say public education is too expensive. You have the profit model of education, or you have the public model of education. The public model says it's a public good. The private model says it's a private good, and it's been going on. So 1868, our university was founded, and it was founded as a public good. Everybody over the age of 14 of moral character could come to the University of California. It was meant to be free. They didn't achieve that completely. But even in 1952, it was only $28 a semester. So we've gone a long way towards not achieving a free public education, although poorer countries than ours have free public education, both in Latin America and Europe. So that's in 1908, the whole issue of whether you commodify education or not was raised to the fore by Thorstein Veblen, a well-known economist. It was picked up by Upton Sinclair, 1922, and he was devastating in his critique of all the things that we're critiquing today.
Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle, exposing the meatpacking plants.
And this book on education was called The Goose Step, interestingly enough. And he ran for governor and almost won. So there was a lot of ferment at that time. This is an old debate back and forth worth fighting for. Now, when Obama went to China, I was in China yesterday talking to the students. One of the students said to him, "You have things in the United States we don't have. You have great public universities. You have a democracy." I mean, that's what people see at a time when the United States is in trouble over being an empire in Afghanistan and Iraq. Here we're destroying something that people all over the world admire. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, what we need, I think, is transparency. Charlie Schwartz in the physics department has been calling for this for over a decade, trying to get the numbers that are always hidden away, et cetera. We need transparency about such things as intercollegiate sports, which is a problem all over the country. And Brian Barsky and Alice Agogino, these are people in computer studies and engineering, they can add the figures, and the figures don't make sense.
What do you mean?
The figures is supposed to be, intercollegiate is supposed to bring in money to the university. Sports. In fact, they're in debt, intercollegiate sports. So we're subsidizing, the student fees are subsidizing intercollegiate sports. And we're closing libraries. So we had, the libraries were supposed to be closed on Saturdays. There were some students that sat in, professors that spoke, and a wonderful donor, anonymous, gave money to keep the libraries open on Saturday. But the university didn't fall into line and open the libraries on Saturday. So these are issues of transparency and accountability, fiscal accountability, that are very important today.
Professor Roy, what is differentiated education?
Differentiated education is one where there are differential fees imposed on students in particular disciplines and professions. And this seems to be an expanding option for our Board of Regents and for our administrators. So the imposition of fees on students in what are seen to be high-value disciplines and professions. The argument being that those getting a professional degree from law or business, now from city planning or architecture, can somehow earn more and therefore they should pay a higher fee. I've been talking about this as differentiated education because it's similar to the creation of toll roads, to say you have to pay a toll to enter this particular enclave. What is quite stunning then this week is that the Board of Regents will not only vote on the undergraduate fee hike, which will have huge consequences on access to public education, but it will also most likely approve the expansion of differential fees in a host of graduate programs throughout the UC system. And in some cases, the regents will have to violate their own policy that prevents fees in graduate programs from being higher than those in competing public universities. In other words, the trustees of university policy will declare exceptions to that policy and perhaps ultimately discard that policy in order to create this differentiated education. Now, I have to note that about 2 months ago, the regents were talking about differentiated education and differential fees at the undergraduate level in disciplines like business and engineering. And they have now seemed to have backed away from that, and perhaps one of the reasons for that has been the mobilization around these issues.
Professor Nader, for the last 5 years, Governor Schwarzenegger has attempted to eliminate funding for the UC, University of California, labor programs. Can you talk about this, pressured by right-wing Republicans and other opponents of labor around the issue of the labor movement?
Well, you have to see that in perspective also. The University of California has been dubbed one of the worst employers in the state, and that's been for a long time. So for Governor Schwarzenegger worsens that situation by his dealings with labor issues. I mean, people are working for the university because they love public university and want to do something, but they shouldn't be taken advantage of to the degree that they are.
The proposal of the State Assembly Majority Leader Alberto Tarico, who's proposed an oil severance tax to benefit higher education. Professor Roy?
Yes, we had an important event on campus on October 26th, organized by faculty, students, and workers. And this is an important proposal because, in fact, it shows that there are ways of creating revenue streams for public higher education in California. It's important that, in fact, these funds would be divided among the UC system, the community colleges, and the California State University system. This is not perhaps the silver bullet that will solve the problem of public higher education in California, but it demonstrates that we have state politicians who are willing to step up and come forward with solutions. I think what has been perplexing for us is how and why UC administrators have not until now been in conversation with some of these state politicians around these proposals. In some ways, it is the movement that has done the work for UC administrators, brought the state politicians to campus, formed these alliances, and we look forward to doing a lot more of this.
But isn't the reason for that the corporatization of the university? You distance yourself. That means that you give preference to companies like BP to come on the campus, Novartis before BP, and you want to get private money so that they can call a tune. I mean, the head of the Regents set up an institute, which you know, in the university, to study poverty, and who decided that? He just gave the money, and he wanted to do poverty and development and so forth. So who's calling the tune? Who's deciding what an educational institution should be? The donors? We're supposed to have arm's length to have a good university. We don't have arm's length. If they tax the oil companies in California, they get $1 billion a year just from that. So there's no effort being made by, I think that's what Ananya is saying, by the university to connect with the legislature and with the tax people to see how can we raise revenues for our purposes.
Michael Collin.
Well, I think that this is important. I mean, the state of California has real problems with its revenue streams in terms of its taxation policies and the like. And we've seen, as your headlines indicated, the crisis is quite real here. And this isn't something that is exclusively about university policy. This is about students in classrooms and workers who are being laid off. Their unions are being busted so that, enormous bailouts can be given to private capital firms in California and on Wall Street, and yet the public education system has to suffer. And this bill that is coming due for undergraduates, and that the wages that are being suppressed for janitors and for building maintenance workers and technical and clerical staff, that burden is being passed on to us, to the most vulnerable members of the state of California and to the most vulnerable workers of the University of California. And so they are going on strike to oppose this, to resist this. The workloads that are being imposed upon those who survive are so onerous, they're desperately afraid to keep their job. And it's a tremendous act of bravery for the unions on the campus. And